I reject this. I reject this show with every fiber of my being. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Joel White. I love talking everything movies, books, stories, and filmmaking. I'm a storyteller, and today we're going to be talking about Star Wars. I'm a passionate Star Wars fan, so let's dive right in. A few disclaimers, as I've always said on my Acolyte videos. If you're going to comment, you are welcome here, whether you like the show or dislike the show. Just please keep it civil. I'm all about people having their own opinions and strong ones. That's totally fine, but just don't attack anybody else, okay? That being said, if you don't know this about me, I'm not a fan of this show. There will be heavy spoilers. I didn't really get to do a review last week because I had some stuff going on, so I'm gonna recap episode 7, but try to primarily talk about the finale. And let me just say right off the top, guys, this show is so awful to me. And I'm gonna do my best to explain why calmly and clearly as much as I can, but please just have some grace for me because I might get a little passionate. I'll try to keep my cool as best I can, but I'm not gonna hold back. I think stories are really important. I think they mean a lot to us as a society. I think they help people and they explain complex things to us, and it gets us to look at things a certain way that we haven't before. I take storytelling very seriously. And I take Star Wars seriously in a sense just because I've been a fan basically my whole life. And now with the Disney era, we have like a new generation of fans, and that's fine. I'm not saying you can't like Disney stuff. I like a good amount of the Disney stuff. But this show in particular, I really want to talk on because I've already had a good amount of criticism of like, why are you watching the show then? Like, just stop watching. Like, what's the point? All you're doing is you're just giving them money. And I'm like, okay. Feel free to say all those things. It's your right to say that. But I try to explain to people, I feel called to talk about these things, to bring awareness to people, to hopefully have a meaningful discussion that's helpful. You know, because some people aren't as into filmmaking or storytelling like I am, and that's fine. But I think sometimes we can just so casually turn on the television or go to a movie theater and just consume something, and just we're not really paying attention of like what we're looking at, what we're hearing, what's like getting inside of us. I think discernment is a huge thing. I'm not saying you gotta always just be so uptight and on guard, but man, these filmmakers, you know, people are trying to say things to you. Everything that they're trying to say in The Acolyte is wicked, perverse, and destructive, and I just don't think it's good for anybody. Woo! So if you're still here, let me kind of dive into the recap of the episodes. Episode 7 was essentially a rehash of the 3rd episode of this series, which is the worst thing I've seen so far in the history of Star Wars. Like, people don't like The Last Jedi. Like, you got to do a lot to kind of combat that, but I mean, to me, episode 3 of this show is like way worse than The Last Jedi. And then they decided it would be a good idea for us to basically redo the same episode and just give you a few more details to the story about what's really going on. And all it is basically different camera angles. Some of it's just completely reused footage. And then those little tidbits of information that they're trying to make it seem like, oh, this show's a mystery, right? Like, don't you want to know more? And it's like, I'm not that interested. And the things that you reveal are kind of predictable, or even once you tell me, I'm like, that doesn't give me any more depth to these characters and why I should care for them. It doesn't give me a sense of like the purpose of their motivations or what they want. Everything they reveal is usually just confusing or evil or just boring. So in episode 7, we find out that the Jedi are on Brendok, and they're like scouting the planet, and they're like collecting plants and using metal detectors, and you're like, that's kind of weird. What are they doing? So Torben, the one who offed himself with the poison earlier on in the series, he's young, and he's like, I want to go home. I want to go home to Coruscant. And there's no explanation as to why. I'm not saying people can't be homesick. I've been homesick, but it's like, what do you want to get back to? Like, do you want to get back to training? Do you want to get back to studying? Or do you miss a certain food? Like, why are you so homesick? It's just like, I just want to go home. That's his only explanation. And then we come to find out that they've been on this planet 7 to 8 weeks. And he's like, I don't even know what we're doing here. And so Saul's like, I guess I'll tell him. It's been 7 or 8 weeks. He's like, we're looking for a virgins in the Force. It's like, well, what is he even doing with the machine collecting plants? Did they just literally think it would be a funny joke to a Padawan? Be like, hey, just go collect those plants. And he's like, why? He's like, don't worry about it. Just do it. Like 2 months. And he's like, we're looking for a virgins in the Force. It's so stupid. And Sol's the one who tells him. His master Indara is not even the one who tells him. And then we come to find out as the Jedi begin to talk to these witches that May and Osha are apparently not twins. They're not even sisters. They're the same person, or the same consciousness split into two bodies. Please explain that to me in a way that makes sense, or that is even remotely interesting or entertaining. It's like, what is the point of that? Like, are you trying to say that May and Osha are actually the chosen one before Anakin was? Are you trying to say that this makes your little rhyme make sense? Like the power of one, the power of two, the power of many. Like, it's all convoluted and messy, and they don't really reveal that. It's like they're trying to make it seem interesting, but it's not, because you never explain it. These characters don't make sense. They have no actual motivation or clarity of who they are and what they want. During the process, I can't, like, the show's so boring, I forget details, so forgive me, but not like it really matters, because there's nothing worth paying attention to. But they are, the Jedi, as we saw in the third episode, they're like, hey, we can take the kids if we want. And so Anastasia starts to evaporate into this black cloud and become a demon. Like, her eyes literally go black, her face becomes stretched and contorted, and we see May starts to become this cloud as well. She starts disappearing. And let me ask you, because I knew that this was happening, and you can watch all my videos, I've said this like almost every time, that I knew they were going to ruin the character of Saul. Whether they, killed him or imprisoned him or just made him look bad, or that he wasn't who we thought he was. We thought he was good, but he actually is a bad person, and he's just been trying to hide it. Some people even thought he might actually be a dark side user. All this stuff, all these different theories, but I knew ultimately they were going to make him look bad, because these showrunners, these creators, they can't have a positive, male role model, or any role model, male or female. They don't care. They don't believe in that. They just believe in, you rule your own life. You determine everything. What you say is right, and so it was just obvious that they were going to ruin his character. So back to the demon thing. She's evaporating and becoming a monster. Let me just ask you as a viewer, honestly, okay? If you were in this situation, and let's pretend, right? This is all make-believe anyway, and do your best to hang in there with me. Pretend that you actually saw this happening in front of you. What would you do? Like, what would you do? Would you do what Saul did? Would you do something else? And I'm not saying what Saul did was perfect or the greatest thing, but the whole point of the situation, the way the writers set it up, and if you're following and if they're doing any kind of a good job, is the point was to create a tense situation of like, I gotta act and react fast, right? So he sees this child disintegrating. He sees someone who looks like a monster who is the cause of that child disintegrating. So he stabs Anastasia. It's like he doesn't really know what her power is. He's trying to stop this girl from potentially dying, or what he thinks might be happening to her. Because it's not like Anastasia's saying anything like, oh, this is how we hug each other, or like, I'm just strengthening my daughter. She's just like, let me just become a monster real quick. So he stabs her, and then all of a sudden, she's like, I was gonna let Osha go with you. Because they can't let the witches look bad, even though they are, and they are evil. They can't do that to all these female characters, because we're all well aware of Leslie Headland's, personal beliefs and ideology. It's like that would conflict with everything that she stands for. They can't have a female character look bad. And so she's like, I was gonna let Osha go with you. Like, it's just some random noble thing. It's like, well, then why were you becoming a freaking demon monster and disintegrating your child and not explaining that to anybody? Why didn't you just be like, hey, this is hard for us, but I'm gonna let Osha go with you. May's staying with us though, and if you try to take her, there's gonna be some consequences. But they're such poor writers, they don't know how to create conflict in a way that makes any kind of logical sense. Because the whole point of this show is to make the Jedi look bad and to create moral ambiguity. Like, to make them oppressors. Like, it's just awful. So then, the other Mother Coral, who is the Zabrak, the one with the horns or whatever, gosh, this is so evil. This is yet again something for me to say, like, see, the witches are bad. She encourages May to get mad and to go start the fire. She encourages anger and violence in a small child. And I'm sorry, please don't come at me with this, any kind of like justification of like, oh, the Jedi invaded. It's like, no, they were trying to figure out what was going on. They were trying to help the children. They wanted to train Osha, which is a positive thing, to take her to Coruscant into an affluent space and give her a good life. To say that it's okay to encourage anger and violence in a child just because you don't like that someone showed up on your doorstep, like, I'm sorry. Because in both cases, with terrible writing, Indar has that stupid line of like, we have the right to train children, with your permission, of course. Stupid line, it doesn't make any sense. It conflicts itself. I'm sorry, I don't want to seem like I'm not reasonable. Like, if you feel like you've got good evidence to suggest why the witches are in any way good, or that that's an okay thing to do, you can try to convince me, but I'm sorry. It's a perversion of morality, especially when it comes to children. It's like, that's sad, that's gross, and whatever, we expected it, I guess, from the previous episodes. So then Coral, she decides, I'm gonna become a demon monster. She evaporates and possesses the Wookiee Kelnaka. And there were, a handful of people that actually have enjoyed this show who were so hyped about seeing a Jedi Wookiee use a lightsaber. It's not that cool of a fight scene. If you liked it, fine, okay? I like lightsabers, I like duels, but I felt like it was kind of slow. I also felt like it didn't make a lot of sense because Wookiees are super strong. Now you might say, oh, well, they're all using the Force, so the power kind of balances out. I guess, but that didn't come across visually. And so that was just, I wasn't impressed. And then Indara gets him on the ground, which also was not very believable, and then she tries to free him of the possession, and in the process all the witches are like chanting like they're somehow part of the possession. And then as she frees him, she like turns her head and then like all the witches die. Guys, this show makes no sense. It's like, what does that mean? Does that mean they were all putting too much of their own power into him, and when she separated it, that's what killed them? There's no explanation. And if that's not the case, if Indara's just that freaking powerful, it's like, why was there even a fight to begin with? And originally when this third episode came out, before the seventh episode came out, people were saying, oh, maybe May didn't actually start the fire. Maybe we just saw her holding it. And maybe that's Osha's just kind of fuzzy memory. Maybe she just thought she started the fire. Or maybe this is just the Jedi telling it, and this is the lie that they've told her. This is the Jedi perspective. And it's like, nope, May straight up started the fire. She actually did it. And so if you go back to that third episode as well, May is just an evil character. She tells her sister, I'll kill you. So anyone who's trying to defend the relationship between Osha and May, especially through all the cringy, nonsensical dialogue that they have with one another, that they somehow actually care for each other, the only thing I could slightly concede to you is that Osha tries to care for May, and that May doesn't care about Osha. She might think she does, but again, she's just so crazy, she doesn't actually care, because at any given moment, she'll be like, I love you, and then she'll be like, you know what, you made me mad again, I'm gonna kill you. It's like, whoa. They don't care about each other. Their characters don't make sense. So now we've got episode 8. It starts with Osha wearing the helmet and breathing awkwardly, and it's weird. And then it looks like Chimera is concerned about her because she's about to hyperventilate, and so he's trying to get the helmet off her, but he's struggling. His eyes go black. This is another weird thing. This is maybe just me, but it's this whole idea of the thread thing, right? They're trying to get rid of your notion of what the Force is and replace it with the thread. Because normally when dark side users use the Force, as we see with like Anakin and Darth Maul, their eyes become like yellow and red, kind of a orangey color, not black. I'm not saying you can't do that, I guess, but I think it's truly they're just trying to replace what the Force is and the way you perceive it. Because his eyes turn black, so it's like a thread thing. It's a witch thing that he's somehow connecting with her on. He gets the helmet off. So then she explains that she had a vision about her sister. And then Chimera's like, oh, that's the future. And he's like, where was she? And she's like, well, I'm not going to tell you. He's like, well, we need to go there. I want to go there. And she's like, well, I want to go there too. And so he's all like, I guess I'll let you just take control of my ship. And they just go, whatever. So they go to Brendok, and then everyone else goes too. So we're back with Saul and May on the ship. She's strapped down to the table. And then she frees herself with the dumb droid Pip and tases him. And guys, I've said this before already. It's like, why are the Jedi in the show the literal worst? None of them know how to use the Force apparently, or use it. Or when they do, it's for the stupidest things like opening a door. It's like, oh my gosh, like he can't sense the danger? He's a Jedi master. And if you think back to like, I think the second episode, when she's like literally hand-to-hand fighting him, he's just like one hand block, sidestep, one hand block, sidestep. And that's apparently supposed to be really cool fight choreography and proficiency in martial arts. It's just doing this and sidestepping. Like, he's amazing then, and she's like flailing her limbs everywhere and can't touch him. But all of a sudden, she can sit up on a table, bring from behind her back a taser, and tase him in the chest. And he just like, goes backwards. How does that make any sense? You could have just had him leave the room, and then she just escapes. You could have done that. But no, you got to show that she's better than him, I guess. I guess that was the point of that scene. Well, she gets on his little escape ship thing and starts going towards the planet. And so then he starts to follow her. So the planet has like a ring around it, and she's got a smaller ship. So she has this idea of like, I'm going to go fly into this ring, and he's going to try and follow me, and his ship's going to get pummeled. And that's just a stupid idea. That's just a dumb thought, because it's like, it's not difficult for him to track you and just fly above the ring and wait for you to come out of it. But I guess she was right. I guess he is that dumb to just fly into that ring and try and chase her. Totally pointless. Just stupid. Doesn't do anything for the story. So then they get on the planet, and Chimera confronts Saul, and Saul's like, I'm not going to let you get away this time. So then they have a lightsaber fight. Once again, guys, I'm not that impressed. It's not the worst I've ever seen. You know, I'm not saying it's awful. I'm not saying I hated it. But it just wasn't that great. And they do a lot of kung fu stuff in it, which, again, I love martial arts. I am a martial artist. Nothing against it. It just feels a little out of place in Star Wars. I don't mind certain choreography or movements being reminiscent of those things. Like even Nick Gillard did that in the prequels. But it feels like I'm watching kind of two different things clashing at once. It's like taking me like out of the world of Star Wars kind of. So whatever, it's not horrible, but as I've said before with all their fight scenes, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of purpose or motivation behind them. It's like, what do these characters really want out of this? What is the goal of this fight? Other than supposedly we're just supposed to think good guy and bad guy, but we're 8 episodes in now, and by this point, you've blurred those lines so astronomically, it's like, who are we rooting for? And why do we care? I've said that so many times in my reviews now, I'm getting tired of hearing myself say it. But it's true. And then, to my great annoyance, Saul actually uses a very powerful force move. And then you might be thinking, well, why were you annoyed? Isn't that what you've wanted? The problem is, I've been wanting it the whole show. I've wanted that to happen because he's a Jedi, and I know what Jedi are and what they're capable of. But then all of a sudden, you just randomly do it at the end of the show because I guess it's the big fight and it's the last episode, so it's gotta be epic. Is that why you did it? 2 lightsabers are flying behind him. They're coming at him, and he blocks them, throws them out of the way, and pushes Chimera back. It's like a super powerful move. And he doesn't even seem that phased after he does it. And it's like, okay, that's cool. So if you can do that, why haven't you been doing stuff like that the whole time? Especially when Chimera is outrageously powerful for a dark side user, for a Sith. Like, he's so powerful, it's crazy. And so you just whip that out randomly. He does this cool force move, and you never do it again. You never do it beforehand. It's just such bad storytelling. So during all this, we see there's visual cues of like, May is wearing light clothing, Osha's wearing dark clothing. I wonder what's gonna happen. Are they gonna switch roles again? They've tried to make it seem like Osha's the good one the whole time. The one that wanted to go with Jedi, she's wearing dark. Like, maybe she'll go dark, I wonder. May and Osha, yet again, have more cringy dialogue that makes no sense. And May trying to convince Osha that the Jedi are still bad, that she doesn't know the whole truth, and that she needs to hear it. So finally, we get everybody together, and May is like, tell Osha the truth, that you killed our mother. Because she tells her that's what happened, and she's like, not wanting to believe it, right? Like, no one would want to believe that. But then she's like, is that true? And finally, after Saul tries to explain himself and defend his choices, and whether you think they're right or wrong, he truly was trying to protect them, right? Like, he lets her know, it's like, all I've ever done is try to protect you and your sister. That's all I've ever wanted. And he explains, and I'm not even saying I agree with this, like, that he didn't tell the Jedi Council, right? But he's like, if we had told them, they would have taken you away, like you wouldn't have been trained, and who knows what would have happened to you. Like, this was your best chance at a decent life after all the tragedy. I was just trying to protect you. So then he admits, like, yeah, I stabbed her. So then Osha, who now has Saul's lightsaber in hand, decides, I'm gonna choke you, because she's mad. Now, listen, I can understand being mad. Sure, that would be a hard thing to hear. She starts choking him, and she's angry, and what really bothers me about this moment is they try to make it seem like Osha is justified in doing this. You guys, you already know I don't like the witches, but also, if you watch the earlier episodes, this is the impression I get, and maybe you get something else, and I don't know if we're all just way off because these writers have no idea what they're doing. But I got the impression that when they were little girls that Usher didn't seem to really like her mothers that much. She actually kind of seemed scared of them and all the other witches. To be honest, she didn't seem like she really liked being there or that she fit in. Now, that's not to say that you still can't have some fondness, for a parental figure, in some way. Like, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying the fact that it hit her that hard and that they're trying to play it off that she's justified in this choking of Saul when all he was trying to do was protect her. When he saw her sister, he was trying to protect May. He thought May was being killed. And so they're trying to make it seem like what she's doing is justifiable because he shouldn't have killed her mother. He shouldn't have killed a woman. He shouldn't have killed a witch. What's really annoying about all this to me is like as she's choking him, they try to make this seem like dramatic and draw you in and like pull on your heartstrings, but it's just gross and weird. So if that affected you, forgive me, I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but it's such a perversion of like the situation and the context of everything. Because they have Saul say, and I feel so bad for the actor who did this, because he, again, has chops and did the scene well. But as she's choking him, he's like, it's okay. That's what he says. He says, it's okay. Like he understands and that somehow she's justified in doing this. So many reasons why that's wrong and evil, because he's a Jedi. He believes in the light side of the Force. He believes in good. So to condone anybody participating in the dark side does not fit his character or that of the Jedi. And why not, as he's dying, say, I'm sorry. Like, please forgive me. Something like that, like, forgive me. I was just trying to protect, like, just something to that effect. Like, why can't they have him say that? Well, because that would actually make him a good guy in the eyes of the audience. That would make him a positive figure. That even though it's sad that he died because Usher's making a horrible decision to murder somebody, that he's trying to let her know that even though she's doing this to him, he is remorseful about what happened. Also, the people who made this show, their sense of morality and their belief system, they don't incorporate ideas like forgiveness. And what's crazy in the world today is I think a lot of people struggle with forgiveness. Forgiveness is also not something, by the way, that justifies bad behavior, okay? Forgiving someone or asking for forgiveness doesn't mean that the bad thing that happened didn't happen or that it just somehow goes away. Like, okay, I'm not saying that. Bad things happen and it's awful, but forgiveness is a choice. Forgiveness is something that brings us together, that says, hey, you know what? Despite the fact that you did this to me or I did this to you, like I want to reconcile. I want to change my ways. I want to operate out of a place of love. And hopefully we'll never run into those situations again. But that's a very Christian concept and belief. I'm not saying you have to be a Christian to believe in forgiveness, but as a high moral value that a lot of these people just don't have and they don't understand. So then they write a stupid freaking line like, it's okay, when it most certainly is not. So then the rest of the show is, again, super confusing and dumb and doesn't make sense. All of a sudden the sisters are back together and I don't even know most of the stuff that they say to each other because it's nearly incomprehensible. And then Kymir's still there and he's like, hey, yo, I still want to train an acolyte. Who's it gonna be? And it's like, well, why can't it be both of them? Or like, do you really believe in the rule of two? Like, that's not explicitly stated. And I don't know why all of a sudden Usher just seems to be all in. Like, in 2 episodes, they try to hint at the fact that she's being seduced. Also, is super weird and gross that they're trying to force a romantic relationship between them. That is twisted and weird. I think if anything, that's the motivation for her to say to train with him, is because she's somehow falling for him in some weird way, because it seems like she doesn't really want to train in the dark side, but it was okay for her to kill Saul just to wrap up all of their past and their bad memories or something like that. That somehow is justice, which it's not. She's like, well, if I train with you, will you leave May alone? It's like, why do you freaking care? All she's ever done is tried to kill you and the people that you care about. Even though the people that you cared about supposedly are all oppressors and all liars and all evil and have never actually taken care of you, never actually had good intentions. It's like, why do you care about what happens to May? Whatever. She's like, if I train with you, will you leave May alone? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, and I can try and wipe her memory too. Like, what are these force powers, guys? Like, again, maybe it's in some random book or comic or whatever, but it's just, They do things so randomly and out of nowhere and without setup, without explanation. It's just plot armor. It's just nonsensical, I want to do whatever I want writing. It's just so weird. So that's what happens. He wipes her memory. They go back to whatever planet they're on, and they have this weird moment where they both hold each other's hand in the same lightsaber. And then we come to find out that during all this, Vernestra gets to Brendok, Saul's dead, and it's like, oh, this is very convenient. I can blame everything on him. And through this, we find out that Chimera was actually the Padawan of Vernestra at one point. So she's got a very sordid past, and it's not really clearly explained, or maybe I wasn't paying attention because I was so bored out of my mind watching this show. It's like, is she more concerned about covering up her past or protecting the image of the Jedi? Or both? Who's to say? But if I had to make a guess, she's more concerned about her past. And I've said this in one of my earlier videos as well. I'm not super into the High Republic. I kind of know a little bit about it just because I keep up with Star Wars. But I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys in the comments, but I thought people who were fans of the High Republic found Vernestra to be one of their favorite characters. And it's like, I'm curious, what does this show do for you? Like, are you happy the direction they went with Vernestra? Or is this a natural progression? Is there something in the books and the comics that makes that make sense? It's like, or are you annoyed that it's like, hey, that was one of my favorite characters. You've just made her kind of look bad. And Vernestra has like this meeting with these senators and I believe the chancellor as well in this like tiny little boardroom. It's like, I guess, do you not meet in the Senate? Like, what kind of meeting is this? I think there was a line where they differentiated what type of meeting it was, but again, no context really. And they're like concerned. It's like, hey, should we review the Jedi? Is there shady stuff going on? She's like, nah, the guy who started it all is dead. Don't worry about it. But she doesn't even have evidence for that because she burned his body. So all of it's just a mess and confusing. They just take her word for it. She's like, all right, I guess the threat's gone. We don't need to worry about the Jedi anymore. Super easy. And then one of the worst things in this entire show, she walks into a room because she's finally decided, oh, I'm going to tell my higher ups. I'm going to tell the Jedi Council or someone in the Jedi Council what's going on. And then they pan down and you see the back of Yoda and then they cut. Guys, I was so, like, I don't even know, like, was I angry? Was I just laughing? Like, I didn't even know what, like, I couldn't believe that they did that. That is just an embarrassment to Star Wars. It's an abomination of storytelling because what are we supposed to believe now? If this show gets renewed, like, you know, there's just some crazy stuff happening behind the scenes because fans don't like this show. No one wants to see them ruin legacy characters and more of the lore. Is she just gonna lie to Yoda? Is she just gonna say like, oh yeah, it was all Soul and don't worry about it, Yoda? And he's gonna be like, all right. Or is she gonna be like, hey, this is everything that happened? And he's gonna be like, you're right, we need to keep this hush hush. Either way, it's awful, especially the latter part. It's like, I don't wanna just now watch everything of Star Wars through the lens of like, Yoda's kind of evil, right? Like the whole point is to make the Jedi look bad. He could have turned on Vernestra. He could have told the rest of the council. He could have done an investigation himself. He could have told the Senate. But now we get to episode 1 and they talk about the Sith coming back and he's like, oh, hard to see the dark side is, right? It's like, oh my gosh. I reject this. I reject this show with every fiber of my being. And you know, the other thing that people are really mad about, there's a short clip of Darth Plagueis watching Chimera and Usher fly off the planet. And if you're a Darth Plagueis fan, from what I understand, it's not as bad as like the messing of like with Ki-Adi-Mundi in terms of like time frame, but it still does mess with time frame and lore. And if you're a Plagueis fan, I can totally see why that would upset you. Also, the suggestion that he got the idea of trying to create life using the Force from seeing May and Osha and from the witches, like, it's so sad. It's crazy to me. And some final thoughts, guys. I know I've been going for a long time, so I apologize, but this show, as I've said many times, is morally bankrupt. It takes any kind of positive idea or figure and just injects confusion into it. Like I said, Soul was the only character I could potentially somewhat root for, and now I can't. They killed him off. They made him look like an idiot. And then, am I supposed to care about May or Osha? And why? I definitely don't care about Chimera. He's a Sith. Sith are evil. Not to say that he isn't somewhat of an interesting character, and again, the performance from Manny Jacinto helps, but what am I supposed to care about this show? What is the point of this show? All it is propaganda. for identity politics, feminism. There's even elements of like communism and Marxism in there. It's just a huge mess. There's nothing redeeming about it. There's no sense of good or right or wrong. It's like, be whoever you want to be. Don't let anyone want to press you. Be selfish. And like, that's all the Sith stuff. If you've ever watched Star Wars to pay attention, especially in episode 3, when Palpatine's trying to seduce Anakin to the dark side, he's like, the Sith are selfish. They only think about themselves. And he's trying to mess with them. And he's like, and the Jedi don't. And even though Anakin's conflicted, he still comes back with the truth of like, the Jedi are selfless. They only care about others. The Jedi are protectors of peace in the galaxy, and they protect other people. So again, I know this is all make-believe. I know it's just a story, but as I've said, stories matter. It's like, why I would never encourage anyone to watch this show, no matter your age, but especially children, impressionable kids, because they're not going to understand it. And what they might think they understand is going to be something that's twisted, and that can mess with people. And that's wrong. That's horrible to present that this might be in any way somewhat like for children. It's not. There's dark themes. There's no sense of what's actually good and moral. And it's just, again, it's a perversion and twisting of all that Star Wars is. I never felt joyful or hopeful or expectant or looking forward to the next episode, or like, man, like one of these Jedi characters, they're gonna make a good stand and we're gonna see what a true Jedi Knight is. It's like, just watch the original Star Wars. Like, watch Lord of the Rings, read stories about King Arthur. We tell stories for centuries, sometimes 1,000 years, because of what they mean to us, because what the characters stand for, because of the feats that they did, and because we can have a sense of like, oh yeah, I can go out and slay the dragon. Oh yeah, like I can resist the dark side of the Force. There is none of that in this show. It is just a slap in the face to people who truly care about the Star Wars that George Lucas created. That being said, guys, thank you for hanging in there with me. I still, as best I can, hold to what I said earlier, and that if you liked it, you are welcome on the channel, and you're welcome to explain why. It's gonna be hard to convince me to like it. I'll just be honest with you. Keep it civil. Thank you guys, as always, for checking out my videos. I really, really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this discussion or found value in it, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.